Okay, our next speaker is Nicole Andre, and she is with the Department of Saskatchewan Ministry of Highways. She is the Senior Asset Management Engineer for Roads, and today she will be sharing with us areas of fiber reinforced chip seal projects that she has completed in 2010.
Well, good morning. So I just wanted to talk about a project we did in 2010. That was kind of the year we took on experimenting with doing chip seals in Saskatchewan. So this is one of the projects we did at that time. So if you put fiber reinforced chip seal into your Google search, this is kind of what comes up. But if you add the keyword Saskatchewan in there, you should get this paper. So this is a paper we put together after we did the construction, and it was published in 2011 at the Canadian Technical Asphalt Association conference. So all the details about how the project was put together are there. And this project, so when we were doing our pilots, we did a bit of a partnership with Colas Canada, and one of their companies, ACP Applied Products, put all the treatments down. And so we worked with them for about a year ahead of doing the projects, and we had about 20 different sites that we had put forward as potential candidates. And then as a group, we all went out and looked at these sites, and we picked 8 of them to go in and do different types of chip seal treatments. So we did some single chips, some racked in chips, some fiber matted, some not. And then we did this project with the sandwich seal. This isn't the sandwich seal, but this is one of our fiber reinforced chip seals. And so you can kind of see the fibers there, where I'm pulling on them there at the edge of the seal. So this project, so we're kind of in the middle of the province here. The blue dot's where my office is in Saskatoon, and then about an hour north is where the project's located. So Highway 312, the pavement we're putting it down on was 9 years old. Really low traffic volumes were about 1,100 vehicles a day, and about 15% of that is truck haul. And it's a granular pavement. So I threw a slide in here about what a granular pavement is. I don't know how many people have them in their inventory, but for us, when you get into our low volume pavement network, about half of them are granular pavements. So it is basically just your sub-base your subgrade's prepared, and then we have about 8 inches of sub-base, and then 6 inches of base on top, and then it's a double seal. And the seal is a graded aggregate with a high float emulsion. And we'll do one seal, and then about 30 days later, we'll let that cure out, and we'll put the second layer on. So that's how we build our granular pavements. So this particular pavement, like I was saying, 9 years old. This is what it looked like in the May before we did the project. So the lots of really rich looking bleeding here. This particular job, when they built this road, the contractor had issues with laying the base. So we had issues right kind of out of the box with this pavement, and we had rutting showing up within the first year. So you can't really see in the picture here, but there is already some wheel path rutting, but it stabilized within the first year. It just kind of showed up and then it stayed. And then you can see here the reflection of, this was kind of later in the day, so the sun's coming down, and you can see like how rich the binder is in the surface of that double seal that's there. So those are our maintenance guys. They've been kind of fighting with this road a little bit, because when the base was laid down, it wasn't completely in spec, so they didn't get the compaction normally that occurs. And so we were having a lot of these little potholes popping out. So underneath, because the base didn't have the right density, then it was a little loose under there, so we had all these little potholes popping out. So we just kind of stood there and looked at it for a while. So the guys wearing the blue jeans are the ministry folks, and the guys in the fancy shoes and the nice dress pants, those are the guys with the big brains from Colas. So they looked at that, they thought about that a while. And so this is what they recommended to do a sandwich seal. So we think it was probably the first one done in Canada. And the way a sandwich seal is built, they do something called dry matting. So the first layer of chips goes down right on the existing substrate. And then you put your emulsion down, and then you put a second layer of a smaller chip on top. And so it builds a nice little sandwich. So if you think of the aggregate being your bread and the emulsion being your, I don't know, your meat maybe. So that's how that goes. And then they thought, yeah, and it's used for really flush, binder-rich surfaces. And then we thought to handle the pothole issue to throw some fiber in there with the fiber mat machine. So this is just a cross-section of what the fiber mat machine looks like. And so it gets attached to the back of the distributor here, and then kind of the plumbing for the emulsion comes right through and into the back here. And then we have two emulsion spray bars here. And then inside the machine, there's these massive spools of fiberglass, and they just kind of come thread through here, and they get chopped here into, I think it's about 3 to 4 inch. You can kind of modify the length of the chopping. And then it's just blowing down in between the two sprays of oil. So that's what it looks like out on the road. So this is while we were doing the sandwich seal, so it's a little hard to tell, but we have that first layer of chip already laid out. So here's the distributor here, and there's just the lines run. Everything's controlled from the back here. So the emulsion application rates and the fiber application rates are controlled back here. So this is what the train looks like. So they're moving, yeah, they're moving in kind of that direction. Okay, so the first chipper's here, doing that dry matting with the larger chip. And then we have the fiber mat going down here, and then the second chipper here. And that's a little bit closer up, so you can kind of see, there's the fiber mat machine here again. And here they're coming along with that second layer of chip. So a fairly, like a lot of control has to go into what you're doing with your application rates on the aggregates. And then with that dry matting, they're not rolling it at all before the emulsion gets sprayed on. So it is kind of loose sitting there on the surface. So you have to be very careful with like how you're accelerating or just, you know, moving at speed with the, and then the other thing they found is the air brakes on the equipment would, you know, leave a little puff of air, and then that would disturb the aggregate. So you'd get these little kind of, I don't know, crop circles on your seal afterwards. So you had to kind of be on top of that a bit too. So that first layer with the dry mat with the larger rock, we put that down at about 80% coverage. And then there's the fiber mat going on. And then the second pass with the top chip is at 110%. And it's more of a choke stone, so it'll kind of go in between that bottom layer and just kind of mesh in there. And then we're rolling along behind. So the application rates here, we were doing that large chip, sorry I didn't convert this for you guys, but 6.1 kilograms per meter square. Normally, if we're doing a single chip seal, we're at about 8.1, 8.2. Our binder in there, 1.8 liters per square meter, which is a pretty typical application rate for us for our chip seals. And then the fiber, we spec that by grams per meter square, basically. And then there's a spec as well on the type of the fiber and that kind of, those kind of details. And then the small chip, we were at 10.5 kilograms per meter square. So we did that, so there's the finished product. It's about a 6.5 kilometer long job. And we put a piece at the end with just what we would normally do with our maintenance guys. They put down a piece of just a graded aggregate, high float, polymer modified seal on the end of it for about 1/2 kilometer. And then we also left a piece in here that's about, just in the one lane, that's about, I think 250 meters long without any fiber, just to kind of compare how it would do with the potholing. So this was all done in 2010. This is before one of the guys that looks after kind of our test sites. We set up a control site that we could go back to every year and just measure what's going on with the distresses on the road. So this is what they mapped before we did the treatment. So we've got a bunch of bleeding in the wheel paths. This is a maintenance seal coat patch here. There's a little pothole right in the middle of it. Because what they were doing is, as the potholes were coming up, they would go with their cold mix hand patch material. They would they patch it, and then they'd go with a little spot seal over top. And that's just to try to tie it down. So that's kind of what they were doing for maintenance. We also had cracking. So there was longitudinal cracking. We tend to find that with our granular pavements as they start to deteriorate and you get rutting happening. The cracking's not in the wheel paths, it's between the wheel paths. Kind of as this double seal over top starts to flex, that's where the cracking starts to show up. So that's what it looked like ahead of time. And then after this, this would be a year later, we went out kind of in the fall and did it. So this is after one winter. So there's a tiny bit of stone loss just out of the seal. And then this blue bit here, that is snowplow damage. So the plow did grab on the high side, but not, like it kind of looks bad on this picture, but actually it's only 2 or 3 stones kind of in a line. And that was it. You could see a bit of a ridge here where that maintenance patch was underneath. And the plow caught on that and took a few stones off. So other than snowplow damage, it looked good. So these are some of the comments from the guys doing the assessment. That it looks good, just some minor pumping in inner wheel path in a few spots, minor stone loss, and then that plow damage. Now, where we had done the adjacent bit with our conventional, how we would do a seal, it looked like we hadn't really done anything. It was just black again. So we went out for a few years and did that mapping with the distresses, and basically we had the same results. So this little highlighted bit here, I don't know if you can see that very well, but that's some of that snowplow damage where we've lost the stones. So that's after 2 years. And then it gets kind of boring because nothing really happens. 4 years, 5 years. Okay, so year 6, which would have been kind of the spring of 2016, the potholes came back. And that year we had a wet spring. We had a wet fall, so and then probably a lot of freeze thaw going on that winter. A wet spring, and then in the spring with the trucks hauling, because of the rutting on the road, we were thinking that's what convinced the potholes they needed to come back. So the guys started patching a bit again. Now this spring, it was a better winter, better spring, and just not a lot of potholes coming back again. So that's kind of where we're at. So I went out this spring and just reestablished the the control site, because we had kind of walked away from it for a little bit. So this is what it looks like now. I went out of, Fugro does our data collection, so we got out there kind of the end of May. They showed up about 2 weeks later and did the data collection on the site. So I have a crack map to show you from their van, but it looks really good still. Like you can see the fibers here, like some of that, it is wearing, right? But there's still, tons, like it looks really good for a 7-year-old, seal. It's in really good shape. This is that snowplow damage, and really after that first winter, because the rutting hasn't really gone up, and the guys were being they might have been a little aggressive the first year with the plows, because they're not used to having chip seals on their roads, so we, kind of yelled at them a little bit, and so they maybe backed off a bit. But yeah, so this is, I don't know if you can see that, there's some fiber there. Yeah, so that's it. So this is kind of what's going on for rutting now. Inner wheel path is almost at 7 millimeters, and our outer is 9.3. And there's the return of the potholes. So, and they're big ones. So there's probably a joke here about how many engineers it takes to fix a pothole. I don't know. And yeah, there's our maintenance guy there. He's kind of giving these guys some instructions. But yeah, so we reestablished the control site. And this was more to get some paint on the road before Fugro came. They used a laser crack measuring system, so we could see where our actual lines were in our data. So that's what the crack map looks like from Fugro. And there's there's just nothing to see here. There's they found a tiny little crack there, which is actually a little bit of where the snowplow damage is. It's just a line of stones missing. So it was a 6.5 kilometer job. We have one area where we've got bottom up cracking, and that's an area where we just have a slough right there with water coming in from underneath. And so we went in this summer and did a short little hot mix overlay there. And then in the LCMS data, we just have some false detection of cracks around where the plow damage is. And so I guess next steps really to be continued. Now I'm working on putting together a database of all of our treatments and hanging our condition data off of that. So I'll be able to compare how this was performing to other, our conventional way of doing sealing on our granular pavements. So.
You had a section with double sided. Do you notice any difference between the section with double sided?
Yeah, actually, we probably put it in the wrong spot because it performed perfect. It doesn't have any potholing or anything. It actually, because we only did it in the one lane, so I think we have more truck haul in the lane we didn't do it in, which would have been the better spot to put it. So yeah, we didn't have any results there.
What was the ADT?
1100.
Postal speed, and did you notice any difference in noise versus the regular pavement surfaces?
Yeah, well, it's quiet compared to probably a single chip seal, and that's one thing. Like, this is very low volume here. There's one farm, I think, along the entire stretch. But what we've found with our chip seals on our higher volume roads, we've gone to the racked in, where you have that larger chip and the smaller chip on top, and it's a lot quieter than the single chip, and that's one of the reasons why we've gone to it. We also like that it kind of, that you get that choking effect where it just kind of tightens right in, and then it's a lot less plow damage in the winter. So.
You said that snowplow crew was used to handling or dealing with chip seals on their pavement. How does the noise compare to your regular pavement that you use, not other chip seals?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, the granular pavements, we're used to a lot of texture on our roads because half of those roads that's the running surface is a seal coat, but we don't have a lot of traffic either, so.
This was the second year of pothole occurrence, and was there more damage this year in the first year occurrence of potholes? Did that damage progress, or was it in new sections?
It was showing up in the wheel paths. And we had less this spring than we did the year before, but it was new spots where it was coming up.
How long will you go on this road pothole before you would do something major to?
This, because this road, there's no I problem at all, we would probably wait for the ruts to get a little deeper, up to maybe 12, 15 millimeters, and then the kind of treatment we would do is we would do a micro rut fill with a seal over top and just keep it going like that. Yeah.
You talked about the ride quality. I know we've got several fiber mats out there, and it's kind of a struggle as we do the evaluation against our regular chip seals. I mean,
Yeah.
ride quality is one of the things that I think about trying to measure when I look at those sections, but, you know, they cost about twice as much as a regular chip seal, so I wonder, are you looking at that ride quality then?
Yeah.
Versus regular chip?
Yeah, we are. That's one of the things I'm really interested in pulling out of our data is, yeah, what benefits are we getting? We found, like, when we did our, in 2010, a lot of the projects we picked probably were a little past when you should have been sealing, especially stuff where we put the fiber mat down, because it had, like, quite a bit of cracking on some of those, and some of those we've gone now and repaved, right? So they're just not there anymore. But where we've, in the last few years with some of the fiber mat we're doing, we're getting it a little earlier, maybe in the kind of deterioration curve there. So those one will be interesting to see how they perform.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.